be here speaking about long-term energy issues and the Green Touch Consortium and opportunities within our industry. My name is Dan Kilper. I'm chair of the technical committee within the consortium. I'm also an employee of Bell Labs Alcatel-Lucent. Just want to say that today I'm going to be providing my own personal views. They don't represent the views of the company necessarily. And I'll also be representing the Green Touch Consortium in my capacity as the chair. So there's a number of different trends that we see going on in networks today. And many people talk about an energy bottleneck. And we see a number of indications that are pointing towards this sort of bottleneck where it's a question of getting value from the internet in terms of bandwidth services and applications, where we're being constrained by energy. And we're being constrained because there are real technical limitations in the hardware that limit our efficiency and energy use. There's also, of course, pressure in terms of court responsibility and the need to address these real climate change issues. And so actually we want to reduce carbon footprint. And at the same time, it costs money. There's CapEx involved in investing in new hardware and equipment to become more energy efficient. And there's also real costs associated with the operational expenses for running your network and the energy costs associated with that. So all of these are putting strain and focus around energy as a bottleneck in the internet. And just to highlight one of the technology issues, a lot of people, and we heard today about the need for more spectrum this morning, if you saw the keynote, in the wireless area. A lot of people aren't aware that actually in fiber as well, there's something that we call a capacity crunch or capacity deficit going on. And you see that going back to the 80s, here I get the pointer working, when we were dominated by voice traffic and TDM systems, we actually were in a situation where the traffic was much higher than a single system could provide capacity. And then, of course, and so we were in this situation where maybe you only made long-distance phone calls on the weekend, if you can remember back. And then, of course, we went through the internet revolution, and something happened in wireline systems where we came up with something called WDM. And these green boxes show the capacity of a WDM system. And we just had this explosion of capacity that really fueled the internet revolution. And we went to pennies for phone calls around the world, 24/7 connectivity, and everything that's involved there. And in fact, maybe we even had too much capacity, and we had our telecom bubble burst. But what's happening now is that things have rolled over. And I put on here a point corresponding to the Alcatel-Lucent system just put out this year that supports 100 gigabit per second on a single line card. And that's showing a significant rollover. We believe, even though that's a single point there, it's a real trend that we're going to continue on something that's similar to this purple line that I drew there. And so we're going into a new regime again where we're not going to be keeping up with the data traffic in an individual wireline system. And so this is referred to as the capacity crunch that we're facing. Now, there's a solution to this. The solution is that I just deploy more fiber, more systems, and I can just build out my infrastructure. But there's a cost associated with that, and in particular, there's an energy consequence to that. And if we can keep up with the efficiency, if we can make it so that the efficiency of the equipment keeps up with the traffic growth, then we're okay. But what we're seeing is that there's also a network energy gap, and that's growing over time. And so here I took trends associated with mobile data, internet backbone, and also our projections for mobile efficiency improvements and wireline efficiency improvements going out to 2020. And I normalized all of these to a starting point of 2007. And you can see the traffic curves are just taking off, mobile especially. In fact, this one is quite conservative to some of the numbers that we heard earlier this morning. And yet, still, even with this conservative trend, we're far from keeping up in terms of the efficiency. So this growing gap has consequences. We've seen already that the ICT industry is responding. And first steps, as you might expect, are to develop metrics, awareness of these problems, and standards, have that call to action. And we've seen organizations such as the Global E-Sustainability Initiative form and bring a lot of attention to these issues. ITU, Green Grid are part of that first response. The next step is, now we see that there's a problem here, we need to do something about it. And so we're seeing a number of organizations, really research organizations, trying to solve these real technological problems. We have groups such as EU consortia like Earth, which is targeting for LTE technologies a factor of 2 improvement in efficiency. Mobile VCE has a green radio project for 100 times efficiency improvement. At UC Santa Barbara, there's an institute that's looking at 100 times efficiency improvement. And more recently, Green Touch, we're targeting an improvement of 1,000 times in networks. And understand that the difference between these different efforts, it's all about scope. So the Earth is targeting LTE, which is near term, sort of 2-3 years out. So you're constrained within LTE. As you go to these others, you're looking out longer time periods, so 5-10 years. When we target a factor of 1,000, remember we heard this morning a factor of 8,000 in mobile data traffic growth. If we look at the trends that I showed on the other plot, you go out 10 to 15 years, you're talking about a factor of 1,000 growth in traffic. And so you have to be targeting factors of 1,000 in your efficiency improvements to keep up with that growth if you're looking out 10 to 15 years. And this approach, I'd like to point out, is also something that's not entirely new. The semiconductor industry has been doing this for quite some time. So the International Technology Roadmap for Semiconductors looks 15 years out. And they really manage Moore's Law. They identify what are the major challenges and obstacles for Moore's Law to keep that trend going. They realized that they needed to do this as the technology matured to the point that it needed help to be able to continue. And it's our view that networks today have matured to the point that there are real physical obstacles that we need to come together as an industry, as a community, and identify what these obstacles are so that we can start the process of making the change happen that we need in order to continue scaling networks to have a sustainable future. And we heard earlier today, and it's definitely the case that ICT is an enabler for sustainability and zero carbon economies worldwide, but it's only going to be that way if we're able to grow these networks in a sustainable way themselves. And that's what we're looking at doing here. So Green Touch has this very ambitious mission, which is by 2015 to deliver the architecture specifications and roadmap. These are laboratory demonstrations of the key components needed to increase network energy efficiency by a factor of 1,000 from current levels. We're a broad, open, global consortium executing research projects to achieve this aggressive goal. We're also a roadmap organization establishing reference architectures and research targets to overcome these major obstacles, and a venue for cooperation and enabling demonstrations among research organizations. In fact, in many ways, we're becoming a consortium of consortia, and we're finding that many research consortiums focused on one part of the network are coming to Green Touch to find ways that their technologies can interact with the rest of the network to get that holistic view and impact. And we're also a forum for exchange of information on energy trends, challenges, and research and communication networks. Currently we have 46 members, and you can see that represented here are many universities around the world: Tsinghua, Dresden, University College London, as well as Columbia in the US. And at the same time, research organizations like IMEC and INRIA, and then companies from components and system vendors, Fujitsu, Huawei, Freescale, Samsung, and also then the carriers. So you see AT&T represented. We also have KT, Korea Telecom, NTT is a member, and Swisscom, many others. So our approach is we're a bottom-up research organization. We use models to structure and guide research and collaboration. Funding is through member contributions, but also through external sources. We can't do it alone. The scope here is too much. We need industry funding to support that. And in addition to this aggressive goal on energy efficiency, we're also looking at alternative metrics such as carbon footprint, network power. What are the consequences of these solutions on these these other quantities, as well as adjacent technologies such as data centers and handsets. They're not included in our factor of 1,000. We're not going to make a handset 1,000 times more efficient, but we want to understand the solutions that we come up with in the network, what the consequence is on the handsets and what role they play. And we're looking to, mainly through cooperating with other organizations like JESI or the World Resources Institute, to measure, model, and predict energy consumption in ICT networks. Here's an example. I mentioned the roadmap, a roadmap that we're developing in our wireline access group, for example, looking at sleep modes, efficient hardware design, new protocols, and low-power CMOS circuits. So this is an example of what we're putting together. We're going to make this public, in fact, similar to the ITRS and their roadmap, and to hopefully provide guidance to the overall community. And on the right is a similar type of trend, looking at breaking down the power consumption in optical line cards. Within the technical committee, our structure is that we have a services, applications, and trends committee that provides the inputs to our network committee working groups, which are made up of mobile communications, wireline access, core switching and routing, and core optical networking and transmission. And we break down how much efficiency improvement we need in each of those areas, and that serves as a target for these different groups. And we have a number of different research projects underway. I won't go into a lot of the details here. This just highlights a few and some of the partners involved in those projects. We had our first technology demonstration in February in London. This was a large-scale antenna system, and it's interesting. I'll go through some of the details. If you have an antenna talking to a handset, that's something that you might have today, and there's a certain amount of power associated with that. So we have a 16-element antenna array, and when we turn on a single element in the array, as shown here, we measure a certain power. Now, when we turn on all 16 of the elements in that array, we find that we can reduce the total transmit power by a factor of 16. So that's not the power on one antenna, but the entire base station power the transmit power goes down by a factor of 16. And this is the benefit of MIMO, but instead of looking at it from the point of view of higher capacity, you're looking at it from the point of view of how much energy savings can I get. Building base stations with large arrays like this is a very different concept from what we have today. You can't simply take an array like this and put it up on a tower. We're going to have to redesign base stations fundamentally and our networks overall. But this is a game-changing technology, the types of things that we're looking at. The question is now, how do we get that into the networks? And there's a lot of processing that goes on in the background behind something like this. We also need to focus on the energy associated with that processing and get the power of that down. And we had collaborators on this included Bell Labs, Freescale, Huawei, IMEC, and Samsung. Within our mobile working group, we also have other projects like this one's focused on separating the data network from the signaling network and what efficiency you can get from that type of approach. Here's in our wireline access group, a number of different projects, everything from looking at the networks, the access networks, and how they interface with, say, a mobile network, as well as going into the home and fiber in the home and concepts like virtual home gateway, where you get that power-hungry box out of the home and put it into a central office. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it'll be interesting to hear in our next talk the opportunities for energy savings there. We have a project that's on single-chip router line cards. The idea is that we take the different chips that you have on a router and try to condense them into a single chip type approach, so you get rid of the interconnect losses associated with that. So now, instead of having one line card with many chips on it to handle a large amount of traffic, you would have many small routers, small single chip routers on a line card that each in their own right would be more energy efficient, or perhaps distributed over a network, a very different network than we have today. And these chips would be tightly integrated in terms of using silicon photonics, multi-core CMOS technology together to gain greater efficiency. Here's an example. There's a consortium in the UK called the Internet Consortium. They're working on specific technologies around for layer 2 switching and in-building type data distribution. And so they're leveraging our consortium to see opportunities to use their technologies in other ways. So many of our initial activities is building our research program. Just showed you some details on that. We had our first technology demonstration. Encourage you to go to the website, take a look, and find out more details about that. There's a nice video on that demonstration. We're establishing common reference architectures, primary research targets, and expected trends. We plan to unveil that at our next face-to-face meeting, which will be in November. And we're also providing an international forum for cooperation. We've had a number of events at different professional conferences and open forums. So I like to show this plot here. So it shows the annual growth rate for the internet backbone in North America. And you can see that early on, just before 2000, we had these very high growth rates. Of course, that's what fueled this telecom bubble. But you see that at this point, we've gone through a clear knee here. And I would argue that the solutions that you need and what works when you're on the steep edge of this curve are likely to be very different than what you need when you're over on the low end, the mature side of this curve. So we've gone into this mature phase, and this is where we need to work together across the industry and the overall research community, the telecom community, to continue network growth and to find sustainable and scalable solutions for the future. So thanks for your attention.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Ron Zimmer, and as President and CEO of CABA, Continental Automated Buildings Association, it is my pleasure to be here. CABA has worked very closely with the TIA, CA, and many sister associations over the years. We're a relatively young organization. Only about 23 years ago, CABA was formed by a small group. And from that group, we've grown now to well over 300 and some members. Over 24,000 industry professionals are part of our organization. We are truly an international body. So when I was invited to speak here, I felt very compelled because a lot of what CABA does is share research and information, and we gather research information on connected homes and intelligent buildings. So this is a very appropriate place. So many of our members, in fact, it was great to meet one of our members, Alcatel-Lucent, and hear about some of the work that you're doing, which we only slightly knew some of that information. So today I want to share with you in a few minutes that I have, and it's always a challenge when you're the last speaker between the reception and this presentation. So hopefully we can keep you to then engaged. And in fact, we have, I'm going to go through a lot of stats really quickly in my presentation, but we'll have a draw for some of our research at the very end for those that are interested in taking home print versions. Some of it's electronic as well. I'm going to cover a couple of areas. CABA is all about the technology in the building, so it's very complementary to what you just heard in terms of the overall ecosystem or ecosystem. And because we focus on the buildings, I'm going to share with you some research from the USGBC, the Green Building Council, and I'm going to talk about some of the efforts in the technology and in integrated buildings. And finally, I'm going to share with you some insights into one is the key driver worldwide is smart grids. And I recognize there's actually a track taking place on smart grids. And if I wasn't presenting, I'd be over listening to some of the good stuff that's taking place in those presentations. But just to give you a sense of what's happening to buildings, because quite frankly, if you look at energy, you look at green, sustainable efforts, you cannot ignore the buildings. And that's why the USGBC has been so tremendously successful, because they have showcased through a lot of great research in terms of the impact that the building sector has in North America, and in fact, they've now replicated USGBC in many other countries, Canadian Green Building Council, Australia, Europe, etc. So if you look at buildings, the building sector, to determine, here are some metrics to give you a sense of of how important it can be if you move to a green or sustainable building. And of course, we're all about technology, and that's not to say that plants on the roof and bicycle racks and recycled carpet, they're all very important. Our world for CABA is the technology. All the technology is going in. So as I move into this presentation, I'm going to share some of that, but I'm going to give you some broad metrics. And again, USGBC is only one of the many councils out there, or groups. There are many good ones like Green Globes, or Green Mechanical Council, and others, Energy Star. I mean, there's some great efforts that are taking place. But if you look at how successful USGBC has been, it really is impressive. And in fact, if you look at the number of people that are actually now being certified, it's really staggering. And yes, the recession may have slowed the onslaught of green buildings, but it's truly something that will not change. It will actually, as people understand the value of what a green building can, or sustainable building can bring to the owner or the occupant, it'll actually only increase. And one of the latest endeavors, which will be, we believe, an important aspect going forward, is that the USGBC has just launched what they call the Demand Response Credit. We in CABA have worked with TIA, we've worked with Infocom International and BICSI very diligently with the USGBC to try to get them to change their LEED ratings. Not an easy thing to do for those that have tried. However, now they are moving in a very positive sense, because demand response and what will take place, what is taking place with smart grids and utilities is huge. And so they have actually just rolled this out. They just actually announced this at another conference where I was speaking on demand response, focusing on utilities. And this project is moving forward. And again, these presentations, I believe, are posted by TIA. They're also posted in the CABA website in the presentation section. So if you say, my eyesight isn't quite, I can't quite get that, you can easily go to our presentations after and take a look at it. But they are into phase 2. They're actually processing or moving forward to make this a full LEED credit. And that's going to be very powerful in the industry. Well, USGBC is not the only one that's actually out there trying to do some interesting things. When we looked at actually about 3 years ago, through one of our reports, we brought together about 20 organizations that worked on what was called the Bright Green Buildings Research Project. That project actually involved these companies and organizations, and you recognize some of these industry leaders. And what we were trying to do is, again, to showcase how technology can be very much a part of a green and sustainable building. We wanted to show that through case studies and through great research that Frost & Sullivan did as we had them lead the research team. And what they actually showcased, what we call bright green buildings. In other words, if you take a green building and you take a intelligent building, you literally could have a building, 2 separate buildings, totally integrated, intelligent, totally green, and no integration. So, but the reality is that often you have this overlap. And in fact, we called it the bright green buildings, where you have this integration of technology. So if you look at this building, energy management systems, lighting systems, sensors, water saving, all of those things that we are now not taking for granted, but still we're on the cusp of moving from individual systems to integrated systems and convergence to the IT. So because, and it was touched on earlier, if you look at life cycle costs in a building, and I love this chart, because if there's one thing that you walk away from if you know nothing about building operations, is that in a 40-year life cycle, the reality is that this is what it will roughly boil down to in terms of the building costs. And often we think, well, the construction cost, that's the big cost. In fact, the architect, design people, well, they are just charging an arm and a leg. The reality is they're only getting about 4 or 5% of the building cost, 11%. It's minor. In fact, often the builder says, you know, our financing is tight, you have to cut it back somehow. Well, what often gets thrown out is actually the integrated stuff. The stuff the technology that would actually make the operational side, the OPEX, which was shown earlier, the OPEX, which is 50% of the life cycle cost, and that's not including, what's the biggest cost in a building most often? Anyone? People. Your people are your big costs. And just imagine, and we can show through research, the value of having indoor air quality, having an environment where people are more productive, they're taking less sick days. That's not even, this is just operational costs. So basically, if you look at the operational costs, if you could cut 30%, 40%, 50% of your energy costs out of that building, it is huge. And that's part of what we heard, through the networks, but it's everything. And so ultimately, we're trying to get that message out there, that it's not the architect that you should worry about, it's really the long-term costs. This is a 40-year life cycle. I was at a building out of Philadelphia, actually, IFMA, the International Facility Management Association, had a leadership event, and they were bringing forward new technologies and new concepts for their leaders. And I spoke there, sharing some more research, and we went to a school, and that school was a LEED Gold, or maybe even platinum. It was amazing. It had plants on the roof. It had great technology. It was amazing. And they said, we shut the previous school down. It was here for 80 years. This school, we expect to last 80 years. So if you think about that, how do you plan your buildings, and how do you plan for the technology that will be part of that? So moving on, there are some key rating systems and metrics that you can actually look at buildings to get a sense of where you are, benchmark, and then move forward. And these are just some, again, not to say that USUBC is the only one with LEED. There's Green Globes, there's other tools, Energy Star, and we have our own tool called the Building Intelligence Quotient, so you can actually take a building like this, do a rating, and determine that how smart is it. And so like Comcast, Liberty Property Trust has the Comcast building in Philadelphia, would be ranked as probably one of the smartest, most intelligent buildings in the world. Well, let's look at the utility world today. Let's just move on to what we call and are seeing as one of the great, amazing drivers today, smart grids. The utilities are going to change so dramatically. It's not that we have dumb grids right now. In fact, we have smart grids. But the utility of the future, and there are leaders, it's going to be very different. You are going to have actually energy flowing both ways. Let's see if I can find my little marker here. Seems to have gone away. Energy flowing both ways. You are going to have, in fact, buildings of all types that will be part of that ecosystem. You will have buildings that will actually have storage. You'll have buildings that will have data flowing to the utilities. Again, beyond from what they traditionally do, the generation, transmission, distribution, and meter, and that's it, the demarc point. And what happens in the building is really by code, at the wiring. That's going to change dramatically. And again, I don't know, anyone want to venture a guess how many utilities are in the US alone? Anyone? Would you believe 3,400? There are. And that's, we think of the IOUs, that's kind of a good acronym, IOU, investor-owned utility. But so there's many rurals, co-ops, and municipal that are out there. So basically, they are trying to figure it out because they are mandated now at the highest level. Stephen Chu, the Secretary of the DOE, the President, and this isn't just U.S. It's in Canada. It's in many countries of the world. So what is the smart grid? So the smart grid means different things to different people. I actually found this definition, and I thought probably describes it. Really, it describes what a smart grid is as we go forward. Again, we don't have dumb grids today. We have very technologically advanced grids across North America, across the world, but they are going to get incredibly smart. They're moving literally from the Stone Age to a stage that the IT sector has gone through, the telcos have gone through, the cable cos have gone through, the CE companies have gone through, that the utilities are now moving, and some of them don't want to, but they must. So this chart, I think, really describes my Oracle, and in fact, I was doing this presentation at the Knowledge Summit, and the people from Oracle came and says, "Thank you for using our slide." And I said, "Well, I just love it because you really have have showcased what is going to be in the near future. So we already have. We have, interfaces, we have systems in not a lot of buildings, but in some. We have the programmable thermostats, and we do have, but what's coming is, in the very near future, is these smart appliances. And so LG, Whirlpool, GE, Samsung, all of these companies are actually already beta testing, deploying, and it's to be in the market next year for many of them. Is there a gentleman here from Samsung? And I don't know if you're on the appliance side, but that's the reality. That's what's being said. Whirlpool's on our board. Bosch is part of one of our research projects. So basically, the other ones that you'll see in the future coming is storage devices, both in residential and in large buildings. You're going to see plug-in hybrid vehicles, PV, electric vehicles, and in some cases, those batteries could be, in fact, storage, which throws another dilemma at the utilities who have transmissions that will need some time to cool down and that may not happen if we have all electrical vehicles going all night. So ultimately, that will be the future. And how fast is it changing? Well, if you look at ON World, who shared this research, shared some of the research which they're selling, but they shared this part, some of it with CABA and allowed us to use it. But basically, the smart meters, and I want to be very clear, there are dumb meters and there are smarter meters. But the smart meter industry is taking off in a dramatic fashion. So what's going to happen? And you heard about the home gateways, and there's different visions of the home gateway, and there's different groups that are working at it. But what is interesting to see is that in the home gateway world, or in the home area network, this is Whirlpool's vision. So Hank, who is their CTO, we were speaking, I said, can I use that slide? He said, absolutely. They believe this is where it is. This is what's going to happen. So to really capture the home market, which we're not there, but thinking ahead, what will happen? Will the smart meter be the be-all and end-all? It could be. But meters actually have a life cycle of typically 12 to 15 years. Utilities don't like to roll trucks and put them in every 6 months, as we sometimes have with our modems. So what will likely happen is you will have a smart device, controller, or home gateway. And if you were at CES and you went to Intel, you would actually see a beta model. I called it the Swiss Army knife, because it had all these little antennas coming out of it, so it could actually reach into multiple protocols into the home. And it was a beta model, and of course, they don't want to build it. They'd love Alcatel-Lucent to build it, or somebody to market it, the AT&Ts and the Verizons and the Bells and others. But they want their Atom chip in it. And when I was recently at the metering conference right here in Dallas about 3 weeks ago, Freescale Semiconductor had a beautiful, elegant model of a gateway that they've developed, showcasing in the display area, and I spoke about it, and they thanked me after because so many people went to see it, because basically that gateway is what they vision that will be that device that will actually solve some of that interoperability issue that we now have. So watch for the gateway onslaught, which will be, in some respects, the answer to what we've had in the home, and why we can't have home area networks. Because you put a Zigbee, and we work with all the protocol bodies, but if you have a Zigbee in the meter, unless every device in the home has a Zigbee compatible, you cannot have that discussion. And so basically, you need to have that universal device, which will change dramatically as technology changes. So quite frankly, if you think about it, there may be something that will be given to the homeowner, will be a reoccurring revenue model from a service provider to utility, will change every 6 months, and they will be thrown away or sent back. So CABA, again, does a lot of research. Energy as a Managed Service study was done recently. You see the companies that were involved, these CABA members, actually we're trying to understand what the consumer is trying to understand. Direct Energy, one of our board members, and I can quote him because he quoted in a public forum, he says, we spent millions of dollars trying to get that solution to determine what the consumer is thinking so we could actually deploy it. We spent millions of dollars only to discover that we can't do it ourselves. So this study was actually to bring together stakeholders like Best Buy, Whirlpool, Intel, Microsoft, and others to say, okay, we have to work together. We have to partner up here to really determine what the consumer wants, how much are they willing to pay? Will they subsidize some of these products? And interesting enough, in the research that was involved, and we worked with actually CBS Vision's great facilities at MGM in Las Vegas. There was three research firms on this project. JLA actually had this piece, and the three biggest ones were programmable lighting controls, eliminating the phantom drain, and it was the room and light and temperature control. So those are the three biggest ones that people really wanted and said, I'll pay for it. I'll pay a good chunk of that. But the future is coming, and it's coming to a mobile device near you. And that is really where the telcos and others and CABA's belief is that actually the telcos are probably well positioned to take this and own the customer. And are there any utilities in the room? Gotta be careful. But the reality is a lot of utilities will actually give up the customer because they don't understand how the technology, they don't have the capacity, other than some of the very large ones, to handle all the data. And so you'll see partnerships, the IBMs with the clouds, the Microsoft, the Ciscos, and others who are going to come in, the Oracles, the Accentures, who are going to come in and say, we can help you. We can handle that. We know how to do all that pricing and control and make sure that if there's time of use pricing, we can make sure the billing is correct. And where does the consumer? The consumer wants it on many different screens, and certainly mobile will be king. So, in another piece of research that we just completed called the Intelligent Buildings Roadmap, we had these companies, and part of the roadmap, we do this every 3 or 4 years to say, where are the building sector, where is intelligent buildings going? This study actually had a big section of it dealing with smart grids. So we really wanted to try to showcase for the companies that we work with, where is the building sector when it comes to technology, and there's a lot of different technologies that go into buildings. Where is it and where will it fit in with the smart grids? Because smart grid will be a key driver. In fact, the big building sector, these buildings, commercial and airports and convention centers, hotels, etc., will in fact be very important. So we have actually a couple pieces of other research that we have going forward. We're close to getting to the full funding on what we call the State of Connected Home Market, which is going to be very obviously residential focused, the fourth one in 10 years. The smart grid's impact on intelligent buildings is, we're just delighted Infocom International's come in with us as an association, but we have, I think, 12 or so. And we're also doing one on aging because telehealth, e-health, and wellness are going to be another key aspect of the future. The good news is, as you heard from our previous speaker and from CABA, and there's a lot of great research that's taking place now. And we advocate that the research be done so we don't spend millions of dollars and waste it. Determine what it is that we can do better and then deploy that in the right way and share that research as much as we can, recognizing that sometimes it is proprietary. So CABA is all about research and information. We have the world's largest collection of connected home and intelligent building research in our library. A lot of it's public, so you can go to it, access it at any time. Some of it's just for our members, and some we actually sell in our e-store. So with that, I'm going to end, and while we do Q&A, I'm going to ask maybe one of the room monitors to just collect whoever wants. The odds are going to be really good here based on the numbers for winning. There'll be 2 reports. This one actually, you can actually, if you don't win it, there's a consolation prize because you can actually download this one at caba.org/brightgreen. So you can get a copy of this. We had well over 2,000 downloads of this research. and I will also draw for one Intelligent Building Roadmap, an earlier version. At some point, the future is going to be in devices like this. This is we all think of a lighting system, which is the low-hanging fruit. This is an LED light by Philips. I'm not just saying that because Philips is the chairman of our board from Philips, but because there are other companies that do great product. But this product is a device now that will have 25,000 hours of usage. 25,000. It is a device that actually it would be replicating a 60-watt bulb and uses 12.5 watts. So over the life cycle of this bulb, which is something you won't change for a long time, will be something like savings of $120, energy savings. And I'm not sure what, if you're in Hawaii, it's actually much more because it's 40 cents or something in Hawaii. In North Dakota, it's around 8 cents kilowatts, so it varies. So at some point, before the lights go off for all of us, we have to figure out how we save our energy and how we use it more productively. But there is new technology coming. You heard it from our first speaker. You're hearing it from me. This new technology that's coming at us, it's a matter of whether we understand it, we explain it, so builders and developers who traditionally have not had to deal with that issue. So that's something that's an opportunity for all of us. And I'm really happy to hear that your roadmap is going to be shared, because that's what we try to do. We try and share it as well. So any questions? LED. LED lighting. And it's, incidentally, you can come up and look at it. This isn't, in fact, on our we had our chairman of the board, because Dr. Satyan Mukherjee from Philips Research is in the lab. He's holding up one of these bulbs, and I was actually on the phone with him today, and he said actually that bulb is even next generation, but it looks exactly like this. This was actually off the shelf at Home Depot. I went and bought it. I go, hey, that's a so ultimately it's coming. But if you think about it, most lighting systems actually burn 30%, so the savings are huge. Plus, most of the old lighting systems create heat. So now your air conditioner has to go on to solve that heat issue. Yeah, the plug, yes, which helps in the winter if you have a cold climate. The other thing is that the plug load, I just learned this as well, plug load in most buildings, actually now most office buildings, is actually 40%. The plug load is growing in most buildings. So the plug load, think of it, computers, photocopiers, servers, et cetera, lights. So the plug load, and you have too much air conditioning, you go out and buy a space heater. Warm up your feet. So I mean, it's a sad situation for what we have, but the reality is that there's huge opportunities here if we get it right, and ultimately some people are understanding because the energy prices are now starting to, and we're going to time of use pricing. They're trying to, and that's why we want to do this research project, Smart Grid's impact on intelligent buildings, because if you have a building like this that's smart grid compliant, it will take advantage of the utilities promotions, and so that if you have energy you're producing through microgrids and photovoltaics, you could sell back to the grid. Ontario alone is now guaranteeing for 20 years they will buy back everything you can produce on photovoltaic and wind and et cetera, on renewables at 70-some cents. That's huge. So it offers now a reasonable return on investment, a payback on technology that you might invest for your building. So there's all kinds of opportunities here, and each jurisdiction, each utility are moving forward in different different paces. But we are, and it's worldwide. So the opportunities for companies that get it and put in the right mechanisms and technologies and services is not just in Texas, which is actually a leader. Actually, I have to say, based on some of the things I heard at the last conference from utility individuals, but clearly. It's something that can be exported around the world. It's huge. President Clinton mentioned that he was a keynote at one of the USGBCs, and he mentioned that here's a huge opportunity for America to actually develop these technologies and these services and then export it. I don't know if I answered your question, but any other questions? first of all, wherever energy is used, and buildings are a huge culprit because we use buildings more and more. Like we live in them, we work in them, we play in them, we shop in them. Like the reality is that it's a huge part of our lifestyle, particularly in North America and increasingly around the world. So you would tackle, that's why the USGBC has been so successful. They said it's 40% of all energy usage. So they went to the US government and says, where's your research being spent? And it turned out to be like 1% on buildings. So, well, and here's where the usage is, from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and they had all the stats. They said it's, we look at buildings, it's 40%. So if you want to tackle energy usage, you have to go after that. Data centers are 1 to 2% of all energy usage in the US. And I said that, I was mentioning that to Jonathan from Microsoft's on our board. And I said, I just found that out. I found that incredible. Like that you wouldn't think that these warehouses, these data centers, are using that much, like 1% to 2% of all energy use. And he said, but Ron, he said, that's very, just think of the economic impact those data centers. I said, no, I totally get it. But if you want to make more energy efficient data centers and then the transmission of, in between, obviously you'd want to tackle that. You'd want to say, and they are. The Cisco's, the Alcatel-Lucents, and others are developing some great products, and they're saying, look, our system's going to be 30% more energy efficient than the last generation. So that's good. But there's a lot of groups that now get it. So it's when you say attacking, it's like they're saying, how do we solve our energy for all kinds of reasons? We want to reduce our CO2 emissions. We want to have a lower carbon footprint. We want to have less reliance on foreign energy usage. So there's all kinds of reasons why we want to have 30% less energy costs. If you're a hospital or university, you can't pass that on to the tenant. You have to eat that or pass it on in higher tuition to the students. So ultimately, if you can cut your costs and your OPEX, your operating costs by 30 to 50%, that's huge. And we got examples, there's case studies in here that show the ROI is huge. Most lighting systems, your payback is actually less than 2 years if you change out your lighting systems. So it's like a no-brainer. But there's all kinds of other stuff that you can also do. So buildings, we take the viewpoint that a building is a building. So if it's a data center, it's a factory, it's your home, it's a building. And most often there's energy usage. And I'll qualify one thing, as much as we love integrated systems, you have to look at every building for what its usage is. In other words, what is the purpose of that building? And what's the age and the focus, and should it be demolished, or is there retrofit, recommissioning? So you really have to look at each building separately. You can't just blanket say, well, every building should have advanced lighting systems. That's wrong. In fact, sometimes standalone lighting systems might be the best answer. And if you have a warehouse in South Dakota, you might not want to have a lot of integrated systems, but you might want to have actually cameras that you can remotely monitor, to see everything's okay. So there's different types of systems that